the night, the wind blowing and the rain descending down, and they said that it was so dark that they could hold their hand in front of their face and couldn't see their hand. It's how dark it was as they descended into the night. It's amazing that in the midst of that and the intervention of time, from the time that Jacob went out the belly of that plain to the time that Bill went out, that God united those two in a mud-soaking cemetery that night. They had no idea what the other three crew members was, but God united those two particular men in that Chinese cemetery. And they laid there and conversed through part of the night, and then they slept, and then when they woke up the next morning, they looked and they saw that just a few meters away that there was a little Chinese village, and here came some of the men, and men, to make a long story short, these were Chinese. This was a small village that were on the Chinese guerrilla side, and they were going to help these two American pilots escape and get out of the country. They took them in, they fed them, and they were waiting for the Chinese guerrillas to come. But I want you to just notice that God put these two particular men together. One that's saved and faithful and serving God to the best of his ability. Another preacher's son that's never been saved, that's done nothing but live for himself. God knows what he's doing. God knows exactly what he's doing.
Amen.
Amen.
That afternoon, before the guerrillas could get there to take them off to safety, the Japanese Imperial Army showed up. And the head of that little village had these two airmen locked away in a room in his little hut, trying to hide him. And the Japanese Imperial Army came in, and the first thing they did is they began to beat and to torture that headsman, and he was an elderly man. And then because he wouldn't tell that he had the pilot, that he had the bombardier of this B-25 that had bombed Japan, they rolled that old man in a blanket, and they dashed gas on it. And then his young wife, they give a stick that was lit on the end and told her to set him on fire. And when she wouldn't set him on fire, one of the soldiers reached down and got their infant son by the neck and picked him up and started choking him to death. And looked at her and said, "You choose which one you save." And she set him on fire. But great is thy faithfulness. Stay with me now, we're going somewhere. After the melee and all of the excitement, here's Bill, here's Jacob locked away in this room. They're beating on the side of the hut. They're yelling, they're screaming. They don't want anybody, any one of these Chinese, to be sacrificed and give their life for them. But the soldiers are already just like they were back in Nanking in 1937, and nobody outside that hut could hear those two men. They separated the men and the children into one group and immediately executed every single one of them. And then they gang raped all of the women in that village over and over and over again. And when they were done, they executed all of those ladies. But great is thy faithfulness. They kicked the door in, blindfolded them, handcuffed them, carted them off to prison. I could tell you about all the atrocities, friend, but we would be here all morning. When they took Bill Farrell in as the pilot and began questioning him, and they wanted all of these men to confess to war crimes, that they had strafed schools and that they bombed hospitals. And they'd done none of that. So they began beating him, and they did all of the other ones. There were several of them that did not make it out, friend, and ended up in Japanese prisons. But they began beating him, and they beat them all alike. And then when they couldn't get the answers that they wanted, they'd take 4 soldiers, and one would sit on his right leg, and one would sit on his left leg as they had him laid on the ground, and one would hold his right arm, and one would hold his left arm, and then they'd take a towel, they'd fold it together, and they'd make a fun on placing over his face and closing his nose and his mouth, and then another soldier would take water and pour it into his nose and his mouth, friend, until whichever soldier it was laying there on the ground, until they just eventually passed out. Then they let them wake it up, and then they do it all over again. And then they beat them. But great is thy faithfulness. And then after time of doing that, it said that they took a rubber hose and they forced it down the throat. And they poured water into the stomach of that prisoner until the stomach had swelled and expanded to where it could swell and expand no more, and the water started running back out the mouth and out the rubber hose. And at that point, they'd pull the hose out, and another soldier would get up on their stomach and jump up and down. They starved them. They beat them. After days and days of this kind of treatment, then one night they would declare that if they did not confess, that they were going to take them out right then and immediately execute them. And they would march them out, Brother Mike. They would take them outside. They would put them on their knees. They would have the firing squad back there. They would hear the bolts pull. While they were waiting there to draw their last breath, then they'd say, no. We are the nation of the rising sun. We execute no one as the sun's going down. We execute you in the morning. And then they would take them back in and torture them some more. One of the ways they tortured them was by taking a bamboo with the knots and putting the knots right there behind their knees and making them get down like this. And that knot and that bamboo would pull the joints apart. And then those soldiers would spend 5 to 10 minutes kicking them as hard as they could in the kneecaps. And then when they were done, they would say, get up and walk, soldier. Weeks and months. Weeks and months. But Jacob, through it all, watched the faith of that pilot that he was introduced to on the deck of the USS Hornet. He was one of the 3 that did end up being executed. But he watched that undying faith in that young man that had been saved years ago at the First Baptist Church in Darlington. He pleaded for 2 years for a Bible. Jacob DeShasher. Just give us a Bible. 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 And one day a soldier walked in and gave him a Bible and explained to him, now you have only 3 weeks to keep it. There's only one Bible. You keep it 3 weeks and then we give it to another prisoner for 3 weeks. Great is thy faithfulness. And he started in the Old Testament and he read day in, day out, got over into the New Testament. He remembered Dad. He remembered the Word. He remembered Bill. But it wasn't until he got to Romans 10, verse number 9. Anybody know what that verse is? Now, with all that in mind, I want you to listen. This is a little tract that was written. It's called From Pearl Harbor to Calvary. Great is thy faithfulness. I must admit I was more excited than usual as I woke that morning at 3 a.m. Hawaii time, 4 days past my 39th birthday. Our six aircraft carriers were positioned 230 miles north of Oahu Island. As General Commander of the Air Squadron, I made last-minute checks on the intelligence information reports in the operations room before going to warm up my single-engine, 3-seater 97 type plane used for level bombing and torpedo flying. The sunrise in the east was magnificent above the white clouds as I led 360 planes towards Hawaii at an altitude of 3,000 meters. I knew my objective. To surprise and cripple the American Navy force in the Pacific. But I fretted about being twatted should some of the U.S. battleships not be there. I gave no thought of the possibility of this attack breaking open a mortal confrontation with the United States. I was only concerned about making a military success. As we neared the Hawaiian Islands that bright Sunday morning, I made a preliminary check of the harbor, nearby Hickman Field, and the other installations surrounding Honolulu. Viewing the entire American Pacific Fleet peacefully at anchor in the inlet below, I smiled as I reached for the mic and ordered all squadrons plunge into attack. The time was 7:49 a.m. What he said over the radio was Torah, Torah, Torah. Like a hurricane out of nowhere, my torpedo planes, dive bombers, and fighters struck suddenly with indescribable fury. As smoke began to billow on the proud battleships, one by one started tilting, my heart was almost ablaze with joy. During the next 3 hours, I directly commanded the 50 level bombers as they pelted not only Pearl Harbor, but the airfields, barracks, and dry docks nearby. Then I circled at a high altitude to accurately assess the damage reported to my superiors. Of the 8 battleships in the harbor, 5 were mauled into total inactivity for the time being. The Arizona was scrapped for good. The Oklahoma, California, and West Virginia were sunk. The Nevada was beached in a sinking condition. Only the Pennsylvania, Maryland, and Tennessee were able to be repaired. Of the eight, the California, West Virginia, and Nevada were salvaged much later, but the Oklahoma, after being raised, was resunk as worthless. Other smaller ships were damaged, but the sting of 3,077 U.S. naval personnel killed or missing and wounded, and 876 wounded, plus 226 Army killed and 396 wounded, was something which could never be repaired. It was the most thrilling exploit of my career. Ever since I had heard of my country's winning the Russo-Japanese War in 1905, I had dreamed of becoming an admiral like Admiral Togo, our commander-in-chief in the decisive battle of the Japan Sea. But great is thy faithfulness. Now keep in mind, friend, that just as I started out with Lala this morning, and